Third oral question, Lord Storey.
I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, we remain committed to delivering a Hillsborough law as set out in the manifesto. It is vital that we get this landmark legislation right and that when introduced, the bill achieves the change expected by those who have campaigned so hard for change. Since March, we have listened to stakeholder feedback to ensure that we deliver the best bill possible. This engagement has been constructive and progress has been made. Engagement is ongoing and will continue over the summer.
Tragic events at Hillsborough will always be etched on our minds, and the appalling establishment cover-up that followed. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, when he came to Liverpool, promised that his government would introduce draft legislation, including a duty of candour with criminal sanctions. This was published on the 15th of April, the anniversary of that fatal crowd crush at Hillsborough Football Stadium, Sheffield, in 1989. The Minister is obviously, and rightly says, it's important to work with families to get this right. But would he give a clear commitment there will be no watering down of that duty of candour intent when the bill is published?
I agree with the way that the Noble Lord has framed his question. There was an establishment cover-up, and it must never happen again, and the Prime Minister has made a personal commitment to the affected families to work with them constructively to come up with an appropriate law. Regarding the duty of candour, the government is clear that what happened following the Hillsborough disaster must never happen again. Under the Hillsborough law, public officials will be bound by duties of candour with criminal and professional consequences. We are committed to achieving a true cultural change. The bill cannot change culture on its own, but it can and should act as a catalyst, and we remain committed to launching a programme to encourage cultural change alongside the bill.
I'm grateful to my noble friend as always for repeating the government's commitment to introduce Hillsborough law, but I'm afraid that the families and their representatives feel a little less positive about the engagement they've had so far. Some worry that they've been briefed against to the newspapers, and generally speaking they worry about the dilution that the Noble Lord Storey has warned against.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that from my noble friend. I mean, I am aware of very recent interaction with the families in Liverpool, and what I understand is those talks have been going positively, and it is very much hoped that we'll be able to reach some form of agreement in the coming weeks and months.
My Lords, Andrew Devine was my constituent. He died in 2021, the 97th victim of Hillsborough, 32 years after his chest was crushed and he was deprived of oxygen. We owe it, as the Noble Lord has said, to his memory and to many others in that disaster and others, such as the Manchester Arena bombing and Grenfell, to fully implement the manifesto commitment of a Hillsborough law, one which I greatly welcomed when it was made a manifesto commitment. Will the Minister, before he appears before the Joint Committee on Human Rights in the autumn of this year, go back and reread the findings of the committee, which called 2 years ago for, I quote, stronger measures to be put in place to prevent a repeat of the failure to uncover and acknowledge the truth of what happened at Hillsborough, and the subsequent promise to the committee by the Attorney General and the Lord Chancellor to proceed at pace? And will you spell out to the House what that means and what the proposals for a duty to candour, but also an equality of arms in legal representation and an independent advocate? Will he commit that that will not be in any way, as the Noble Lord Storey has said, be watered down or diluted? Don't we owe that to the memory of Andrew Devine and the many others who suffered?
Well, we had the Noble Lord asked a similar question when we last spoke about this very serious issue. And as I shared with the House, I also have a personal connection in that a friend of mine's brother was killed at Hillsborough. The Noble Lord asked about parity of arms. What our manifesto commitment was to provide legal aid at inquest for victims of disasters or state-related deaths, and that's the commitment which we will fulfil. And what we're currently doing is exploring how best to deliver on this commitment, and the House will be updated in due course when we reach that stage. What I can also say to the Noble Lord is the government has accepted the inquiry's recommendation to make it a legal requirement to maintain a publicly accessible record of recommendations made by select committees and coroners and public inquiries. And there is now an up and running website where the infected blood scandal recommendations can be seen, and the Grenfell Tower Phase 2 recommendations can see, and it can be monitored how the government is progressing in meeting those recommendations.
My Lords, I ask in plain terms, what will be the obligations of candour imposed under this new law? What will be imposed on public servants? In short, what will they be obliged to do and say that they are not at the moment? If the Noble Lord the Minister cannot answer today, will he please write to me and place a copy in the library?
Well, as I think I said in answer to an earlier question, the government has been quite clear that under the duty of candour, public officials will be bound by duty of candour with criminal and professional consequences. But the Noble Lord is shaking his head. But what I also said is that we do think there needs to be a wider cultural change, and there need to be other programmes put in place to achieve this. If there's more detail which I can provide, I will happily to write to the Noble Lord. But I do think we're being very genuine and very explicit in the ambition we have set forth, that duty of candour will be absolutely at the core of all public officials' role.
My Lord, shortly we will be hearing a statement yet again on the infected blood compensation scheme. Last week we heard about the continuing problems with the Post Office Horizon scheme. Both scandals were made much worse over decades because of the lack of candour by officials. In opposition, including the Noble Lord the Minister, many of whose amendments on the duty of candour I signed, Labour said it would introduce it to prevent scandals like these in the future. But the press are reporting that the delay is caused by officials watering down the details, including the level at which officials are bound by the duty of candour. Can the Minister confirm that there is no truth in this?
Well, I think that's, if I may say so, a similar question to my noble friend Baroness Chakrabarti. What I've heard is the ongoing discussions are actually reasonably positive, and we are very hopeful of reaching an agreement in the coming weeks and months. And it's certainly not the intention to water down recommendations. However, it is our intention to come up with a workable bill which forms part of a wider work programme. And as I think I said in answer to the Noble Lord, Lord Alton, where we have also put in place this website so where people can monitor how the government is making progress with other recommendations on other scandals like the infected blood scandal and the Grenfell scandal.
Lords, can the Minister confirm, I think he said this in answer to my noble friend Lord Alton, that the bill will guarantee funding for legal representation for families who participate in inquests and other inquiries, because without such funding, families cannot effectively participate.
As I said before, it is a manifesto commitment to provide legal aid at inquests for victims of the disasters or state-related deaths.
My Lords, the right-wing press had a role to play in this scandal. Will this Act or any other Act address the issue that the media played a major role in Hillsborough and many other scandals?
I think this bill, which hasn't been published yet, won't address that issue. However, I take the point which my noble friend makes, and then really he's raising a far wider concern. And if there's anything more I can say to the Noble Lord, I would write to him But I think his question goes very far wide of the question itself.
Hundreds of millions of pounds are being spent on public inquiries following deceitful conduct by police officers at Hillsborough, Orgreave and in the Spy Cops inquiry. Wouldn't we save a lot of money and help to restore confidence in the police if officers felt that they might lose some of their pensions if they failed to observe a duty of candour and, for example, doctored evidence again?
Well, I take the point which the noble Lord makes, and we'll see what the recommendations are. And as I've said in answer to earlier questions, it is foreseen that the duty of candour, that the professionals involved could be subject to criminal and professional consequences, basically with the full might of the law.